Hello everyone. Today we will be talking about our two existence verbs, iru and aru. We discussed verbs last time. We've gone over the des verb. It's kind of like a verb, but today we're going to be focusing on the two that beginners often get confused, and hopefully with this we'll be able to separate the two of them out. Now, this is one of those situations where you want to not rely on the English too much, because iru and aru, the two new ones that we're learning, as well as des, the one we've already talked about before, they all can mean the same thing. They can all be the be verb, is, am, are, was, were. Depending on the sentence, they can all be translated that way. And so it's hard to say iru has this meaning in the sentence, and you can point to a word and say that's what iru is. And same with aru. Rather, similar to particles, they have jobs, more so. And they are used to show the existence of something, show whether something does or doesn't exist, in the sentence. And you'll see it translated as be, you'll see it translated as has sometimes, but you'll see fundamentally the job doesn't change. So keep that in mind. We're looking at ways to show the existence of something. And it may be translated as be, it may not be translated as be. So up until now, just as a quick review, since it's mentioned here in the lesson, we've talked about des up until this point. And, we said things like, we gave facts to say, he is a student, or I am sleepy, or that is cute, or this pizza is delicious. These are different ways that we've used des. However, if we're talking about describing the presence of something, up until now, we've described other things. If I said the pizza is delicious, or just pizza is delicious in general, we aren't talking about whether or not there's pizza in front of me, or in the room, or in my stomach. We're just talking about it, the general concept. Or he is a teacher. He may or may not be in front of us, but we can still talk about him. With iru and aru, though, we're saying, hey, that thing, it is. It's over there. It's in front of me. It's on top of the desk. Or it isn't. So let's jump into those two. There are two different ones, iru and aru. We're going to talk about aru first, and then we will jump into iru just after that. Real fast, you can see it noted that iru is an ichidan verb, aru is a godan verb. And what that means is today, I believe we're just going to focus on the positive forms, and we're still sticking to the polite conjugations. And so here's what you need to know. Iru, we will be using it in the polite form imasu. Remember, those ichidan verbs are the ones where you just chop the ru off the end of them and you add mas after it. Aru, however, as a godan verb, requires that change. That ru changes into a ri, and you get arimasu. And if we have time, we'll talk about the negative forms later on, but these are the two that we're going to be focusing on, imasu and arimasu. And let me just go ahead and tell you now that these don't change depending on how many things you're describing. Whether there's one cat or a million cats, it's the same thing. Imasu is going to be used to describe those. So what's the difference between these two? We've got the two. They're ones that you really don't want to mix up. Sometimes the mix-up can just be an amusing mistake. Other times it can sound a bit off-putting, almost offensive. I doubt anyone would take it offensively, but it would make you think, and you'll see why. What are they saying about that person whenever you use it the wrong way? Iru is used to talk about animate objects. And animate objects, when you say animate, some people think of different things. So let's clarify that a little bit. Animate objects typically will be people, living people, and animals. people or animals. Furthermore, they're things that are alive. They can think. Now, we're not talking about whether or not they have a consciousness or free will, but just, in the sense that a cat can think, I'm hungry, I'm going to go eat some pizza. I don't know why a cat's eating pizza, but hey. But they can think and they can move on their own. You'll notice that plants don't fall into this category. You might say they're an animate object. Some plants can move on their own, but plants would fall into the other category, which is aru. Aru is used for inanimate objects. That can be anything, almost everything in front of you right now, wherever you happen to be. The smartphone that you're holding, the pencil that you have, the plant that's nearby you, as well as anything that is not physical. And you'll get some examples later on. So jumping back, iru is for our animate objects. More easily, you can think people or animals. And that's correct 99.9% of the time. Iru is for people or animals. Aru is for objects. So let's jump right into it. Like I said, we're going to do aru first. But here's a couple of quick examples. Don't worry about the structure of it. This is just a comparison. If we're talking about a book, a hon, you'd say, hey, there's a book. Hon ga arimasu. There's a book. Books are not animate. I hope they aren't. And so you have a book, and then you use the aru verb along with it. However, if you're talking about a dog, you wouldn't say that the dog's an object. It's a living, animate thing. Inu ga arimasu. Inu ga imasu. Definitely don't say inu ga arimasu. It sounds like it's some kind of animatronic, nightmare dog. Inu ga imasu. And, I said, it can be taken the wrong way, but that's usually not the case. And so it's better, as I've said before, it's better to make lots of mistakes and learn from your mistakes than be worried about, oh, do I use iru? Do I use aru? I'm not sure which one to use. I'll just not say anything. It's always better to, try these up. Or try these out, excuse me. So let's talk about the structure. You might have noticed something that's a little bit strange with these sentences. Up until now, I'm going to type this out, we have focused almost completely on the ewa be desu pattern. So you might say, if you like books in general, you might say something like hon wa omoshiroi desu. Books are interesting. And we've talked about verbs, so I might say something like this. If I talk about, Japanese, I teach Japanese once a week. So I might say something like this. Watashi wa nihongo o oshiemasu. We've stuck with wa, our wa topic particle up until now. However, with iru and with aru, the subject is marked with ga. Now, if there's time at the end of the lesson, I'll go into a bit more the technical reasons for why this is the case. But ga is a huge topic. It covers so many different things. Books have been written about this single particle. I'm not joking. And it's one of those things where if some of you are not English native speakers, when you learned English for the first time, and the first time they taught you the word be or to be, is, am, are, was, were, presumably they didn't teach you everything about be the first day, because it wouldn't be possible. Ga is the same way. So what I would like you to do is remember this as a pattern. When you're using aru and iru, you're going to use ga. So think of it this way. This is the pattern. I'm going to leave it in the positive form. These are the two patterns that we're working with today. Something something ga arimasu and something something ga imasu. So the subject is marked with the ga. Subject is marked with the ga. And it means it talks about it a little bit here, but you'll see one of the reasons, not that you need it, but it helps clarify things, is what comes up next. So look at this sentence. Hon ga arimasu. So it could mean, as the page says, it could mean there is a book. You're looking in front of you and someone says, describe what you see. And you say, oh, hon ga arimasu. Yeah, there is a book. Now, you would translate that as there is a book, and that sentence doesn't really suggest whose book that is. That's one way of using it. However, check this out. We can take the wa that we've been using up until now, and we can say this. Watashi wa hon ga arimasu. Now, our core sentence, that inside chunk, hon ga arimasu, it still means the same thing. There's a book. However, by putting ourselves, watashi wa, as the topic, it's now saying, if you want to translate it literally, as for me, there is a book. Or more naturally, I have a book. Now, there are other ways to say I have something. It usually refers to the more holding version, like if you actually have something and you're holding on to it. But this is a really good way of describing something that you own, something that you have. The topic marks who we're talking about, and then the ga marks what exists or doesn't exist. And in that sense, the wa is the topic, that's the watashi, and the ga is the subject. It's the thing that's being, that's being presented and whatnot. I would like to stop here and let's practice this a little bit, before we jump in too much further. For those of you that this ga arimasu and ga imasu, this is your first time doing it, you might think, okay, I need to slow down. And so let's practice this. And just for the sake of getting the wa and the ga in the sentence at the same time, usually I say just drop watashi wa, because it's pretty clear we know who you're talking about. You're talking about yourself. But so we can see this full sentence pattern, I would like for you to include that. And this is a practice time. Practice if you want to, but you don't have to. Look around you. And it can be something that's in front of you now, nearby. It can also be something that is, something that might not be in front of you, but just something that you have. I have a Nintendo Switch, but I don't, have it in front of me necessarily. So let's try that out. Use this pattern and tell me something you have. Tell me something you have. Presumably you have either a computer or a smartphone, if nothing else, because you're here, you're using Discord. And don't forget, this is a beginner's event, so let's stick to hiragana. If you put kanji in, please add the hiragana afterwards, just so sentences don't come out that a lot of people are unable to read. And while people are doing that, Raito, your mic was on. I went ahead and muted you for now, but if you can mute yourself, then I'll turn off the server mute. Thanks. So let's look at what people are typing. FIFO must be hungry because they're talking about food. Watashi wa orenji ga arimasu. They've got an orange. Danny is also talking about food. They have dinner. Bangohan ga arimasu. Wizard is using one of the two ways that you can talk about smartphones. And then don't forget the wa after the watashi. So, watashi wa neko ga arimasu. Is there a difference between keitai and smaho? Which, if anyone asking, smaho is the shorter version of smartphone. Yeah, there is. Smartphones refer to just the smartphones as we know them now. You know, your Android devices, your iPhone devices. However, I think in other countries as well, and still in Japan, there are still flip phones. If you say keitai by itself, you still see flip phones, especially ones that are marketed towards older people. You'll see ones that are, simpler to use or something that they're familiar with. Keitai itself, the actual word itself, refers to just something that you're carrying. But in general usage, if you say keitai, then you're talking about, you can say that for your phone. So if you say, I lost or I forgot my keitai, and you're talking about your smartphone, that's totally okay. Totally okay. However, if you say smaho, then it's completely clear that you're talking about your phone, and your phone is a smartphone. Also, I do apologize. I cannot quite figure out, the Discord said it would truncate everyone's names, but it's only truncating one person's name. So that might be something I need to look into further. But anyway, let me jump back up and see. Other people are talking about ball pens, drinks. One person said, I believe they wanted to say tomodachi. And remember, tomodachi is, friends are living, breathing things. They're animate objects. And so tomodachi you would not use with aru. You'd use iru. So right now, let's think about objects. Oh, it won't hide nicknames. I see. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, S. That's unfortunate, but okay. I'll figure out a different way to deal with that in the future. Anyway, let's continue. But so far, the sentences, they're looking great. So, you can drop off the watashi wa, and it could still, depending on the context, refer to something that you have, like I said. So if you say, terebi ga arimasu, you might be, if you're talking to someone and say you're holding your hand out and pointing at the TV and say, yes, we have a TV, then, you might be referring to the existence of it. But even just by itself, terebi ga arimasu can mean, I have a TV. Context will decide whether or not it's, something you're talking about, the possession of it, or if it's just, hey, it's something that's there. For example, if you say, in the park, there are flowers, hana ga arimasu, you're not laying claim to them. You're just saying, hey, these flowers are over there. So, up until now, for all the things we've talked about with aru, with arimasu, so I'm going to really quickly mention a few of the things people mentioned. People talk about drinks, phones, umbrellas, dinner. You can see the trend here. They're talking about objects. Now, you can also talk about things that you can't actually touch. So, you can talk about time. So this is a very common one. If, say, you're working in Japan and you need to ask someone, if they can help you. You might say, "Jikan ga arimasu ka?" Do you have time? And so in this case, you're not saying, is there time? Does time exist? Are we in a program, a simulation? No, it's not that. It's just, do you have time? And for those of you that have learned this verb, motsu, which is to have or hold, it's closer on the holding end. Motsu, just to give you a bit of a distinction, motsu is closer to, it's used more often with the actual holding. As in whatever you're holding with motsu, it's in your hands. But when we're talking about more general existence, possession, you tend to see あります, ある, more often. ある. あります. 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 Now, let's jump over to the other side. Someone put this sentence out and they used arimasu. So let's show you, what you would use. Those animate objects we were talking about. If it's, friends or a bird or Godzilla or a cat, whatever, you're going to use imasu. The structure is exactly the same. There's no change in the sentence structure. It's just that imasu is going to be used with your animate objects. Arimasu, like we talked about a few minutes ago, will be used with your inanimate objects. So here, I have a friend or I have friends. Given this simple sentence, we can't really tell which one it is. It could be either. But tomodachi ga imasu. I have a friend. I have friends. Same with the bird. This one, if I had to guess, I'd say, oh, there's a bird. You might be referring to a bird that you own, that's a pet, but there is a special word, kao, which is not, it is not the same word as to buy, but it's pronounced and written the same way. Not in kanji, but in hiragana. So usually if you're talking about owning pets, as in I have a dog or I have a cat, we tend to use that one. So if you see the ga imasu referring to an animal, you're probably talking about looking out the window and saying, hey, there's a bear, which actually is becoming more and more common in my area of Japan. The amount of food that the bears can find is not enough to where they're venturing further and further out from the mountains, sometimes in front of people's houses. And on top of that, a lot of bears are not able to get enough food for the winter. Their winter hibernation, so they're in starvation mode. So they don't go to sleep in the winter, and they're out looking for food, getting more and more desperate. So for all the benefits that living in the country has, we do have bears from time to time. We've also had, if any of you have seen Mononoke Hime, do you remember the inoshishi, the wild boars, about 2/3 of the way into that movie? We had one of those walk by the train station that's closest to us. And I'm actually in the city. But the overlap between human civilization and animals is growing every year. Okay, back to the grammar. So, real fast, let's practice this. This one's going to be really easy. Tell me about your family. Tell me about your family. And we're not going to talk about how many brothers or sisters you have. Just tell me someone that's in your family. For example, I'm going to keep it simple. Okasan ga imasu. I have a mother. So whether you have a mother or a father or a brother or a sister or a pet, let me know. Let's just keep it simple. I just want you to practice getting those right nouns, getting those animate living things next to the imasu. If you feel this is, a bit too easy, you can think about some of the stuff we've learned in previous lessons, and you could say something like this. You could attach adjectives to the nouns. So you can say, hey, I've got an interesting little brother. Omoshiroi ototo ga imasu. You can also remember the to, that to particle we use to say this and this. You can do this. You can say imoto to ototo ga imasu. By the way, if anyone here is a new member and you're from our Duolingo converts over the last week or so, welcome. Hope you're enjoying your time here. And again, if you have any questions, you're free to ask whenever you want. There's not an official question time, so you just kind of toss them out. Someone asked about keitai and smartphone earlier, and they just threw it out there, and that's perfect. I see Rihito's trying to make me jealous, talking about their cute kitten. Okay. It's looking good so far. If you're typing, please keep typing. I want you to finish what you're typing and get that out there. I don't have a cat because we're in a rental house and we're desperately looking for our own place so we can get pets because I refuse to not let my children have pets. Both me and my wife, Saki, the Renshu artist, we've had lots of pets when we were kids. And so we're trying to get there as fast as we can. It'll happen. It'll happen. It's just a matter of time. Okay, so we've been keeping the sentences really basic so far, but we need to expand on this a little bit. Let's make them a little spicier, a little bit more interesting. Now, up until now, unconventional ways. Let me think on that. I don't have an answer for you off the top of my head, but I will think on that. Let's circle back to that at the end of the lesson. Now, up until now, we talked about day. And if you remember the particle day when we talked about it, I was strangely focused on it being the location for an action. That's what I said over and over and over again. I didn't just say location. I said location for an action. So if I said, for whatever reason, I studied Japanese in a park, I'd say 公園で日本語を勉強します。公園で at the park. However, I said that because when you're talking about existence, specifically these two verbs, ある and いる, you cannot use で. You just cannot. It's not a sometimes you can use it, it's a you can never use it. Instead, you're going to use に. So ni is used for locations with aru and iru. So a few of you talked about birds earlier. Megami earlier up mentioned birds. And maybe Megami wants to talk about where that bird is. And they say, yeah, there's a bird in the sky. They might say, Sora ni tori ga imasu. And that's because there is no action. It might be that the bird is flying or dancing up there in the sky, which would be awesome. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about there is a bird in the sky. And with that, we're going to use that ni particle. And apology, not from me, but from Japanese, the language. This is usage number 3 for ni. We've talked about times. We've talked about direction of action, with iku and kairu and whatnot. And now we're talking about location of existence. There's more. But each one comes in its own situation so that it couldn't be confused for something else. Sora can't be time. And, so it must be a location. And because we're using imas or arimas, we're talking about the location of the existence of something. There is this thing, over there. The structure doesn't change if you're talking about arimasu or imasu. Like I said, the only structure that changes is which verb you use. So, hey, there are birds in the sky. We're using imasu because of tori. And hey, there are clouds in the sky. Clouds are not alive, I don't think. And so we use arimasu. Sora ni kumo ga arimasu. Again, structure is exactly the same. We just have to make sure we have, we have that formation, done. Now, look at all of this. We're switching over to the negative form just a little bit. And I'll go ahead and just tell you, the negative form for iru is imasen, excuse me. The negative form of aru, as you can see on the screen, is arimasen. So let's look at this sentence. Kare wa uchi ni, remember uchi refers to home. Kare wa uchi ni terebi ga arimasen. So he doesn't have a TV at home. He doesn't have a TV at home. This would work in the same way if you swapped it with arimasu. You could say he has a TV at home. Kare wa uchi ni terebi ga arimasu. And before we jump into this next sentence, I want to practice this a little bit. So let's not worry about this no stop. In fact, let me back up so we don't have that distracting us. And let's think about your house or your dorm room or your apartment or wherever you happen to be at the moment. It might be a hotel room, I don't know. And let's describe a bit more something that you can see or that you know about. So I'm going to think about my house, and I'm going to say this. This is also a good chance to pick up some new vocabulary relating to houses. Daidokoro, which is a strange word. Daidokoro is kitchen, and there's a table in our kitchen. So, daidokoro ni teburu ga arimasu. There's a table in the kitchen. Contextually, you could probably guess in my kitchen. There's a table in my kitchen. So let me know what you see or what you know about, where you happen to be right now. Let's try and be a bit more specific. Don't say this thing exists, but tell us where it exists. And if you don't know a word, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. You just let us know. Say, how do I say this in Japanese? And we're here to help you. Excuse me. You can use arimasu. You can use imasu if you want. You can say, my cat is, in the bedroom. So Danny is talking about, I believe, salt. Salt in the genkan. The genkan is something that may not exist in your house. It refers it can refer to the entrance of the house. It can also refer to just inside the entrance, which for a Japanese house is usually where you take your shoes off. That little space where there's a step up and you remove your shoes. So other people are talking about pillows. Someone talked about 4 people in their apartment. Don't forget the ga. You can, just as a comment off to the side, you can drop the ga in casual speech. So for the person that's talking about people in their apato, if you're speaking more casually, you could say that. But keeping with the mas, the polite form, I definitely hold on to that ga and say yonin ga imasu. I'll give you about 1 more minute, and then we'll jump into the last section of this lesson. Oh, and just in case you're wondering, you can see it on my, well, if you're watching this video, you can see it. Neko Rasu a bit earlier put up a slightly longer sentence than everyone else is doing. And just in case you can't understand that, don't worry. They're using a nice little thing called relative clause that talks about, it's a different way of showing location, a way of kind of moving around parts of the sentence. So they talked about a desk that's in their room and what's on top of that desk. Okay. Looking good. All right, let's keep going. So, actually, jumping off of Ross's sentence, I'm going to, if you can scroll back up, maybe 5-6 lines, and I want you to look right in the center. If you're looking at the video, you can see me highlighting it. They added a bit extra, a bit more in front of their ni. In fact, they added the word ue. Sukue no ue ni. And this is a really cool way of describing things with even more accuracy. You can use it to describe things in relation to other things. So real fast, quick grammar, or not grammar, vocabulary review or learning, depending on if you know them or not. What does ue mean? Anyone? Who can type it fastest? Above. All right. You can probably guess what's coming up next, so you can start typing your answer now. What's shita? Below or under. It can be both. They're both correct, below or under. And I'm going to my chopstick using hand. What about migi? That would be right. Although for some of you, you might hold your pencil or chopsticks with the what? Hidari. Left. There we go. And there's one more, or two more. Two more I'm going to mention for today. What about naka? Within, it can mean middle. For our usage, we're probably going to be closer to the inside or within. And then one more. I mentioned this one because it's in the title of everyone's favorite Ghibli movie. Next to beside, there's another word that also means beside. Tonari doesn't necessarily mean like stuck to one another. It can have a bit of distance. Whereas, just let me go ahead and mention it because it's here. Soba, it's not the noodle, although that there's also the noodle soba. Soba can mean next to. This one is closer. Soba feels like it, or whatever, or whoever is right next to you. Tonari can be next to, but not necessarily close. For example, you can talk about, the house next to you, and the houses can have some space between them, and that would be tonari. Okay. Anyway, these are all directional terms, and you can use them with no to further describe things. So I'm going to use what's on the screen. Tonari no machi, yeah, neighboring city. And there could be 15 or 20 minutes between the two cities. But yes, you could say tonari no machi. So I'm going to stick with what is on the screen. And so if I say isu no shita, this is a new way of using no. But you're saying under the chair. And the direction that you're using always comes afterwards. So isu no shita would be under the chair. Similarly, isu no ue is above the chair or on the chair. It could be either. You have to guess from context. So isu no ue could be referring to, say, like a book that's on the chair. It could also be referring to a magical book that's floating slightly above the chair. And I'll give you one more. If for some reason you have a hollow chair, you could use this. You could say isu no naka. But let's be a bit more realistic. And you might say something like heya no naka, inside my room. Or as my kids might ask whenever we get a package, what's inside the box? Hako no naka. Now, just like all locations we've used up until now, we're still using that ni afterwards. So if you take a look at the screen, you've got isu no shita ni neko ga imasu. Or in other words, the cat is under the chair. Or there is a cat under the chair. You have a bit of flexibility in which English translation you use. So I'm going to kind of break that down for you. It's going to look like this. The object or person, no, and then the direction comes after it. So if we're talking about Totoro, you might say something like this. Remember the daughter's name, or not the daughter, but there's two daughters. The younger daughter, the little sister, her name was Mei. So you'd say Mei no tonari ni Totoro ga imasu. There was Mei, and next to Mei, there's Totoro. Now, I'm going to give you a few more examples. We talked about migi as well. So if you want to say right to the right of the table, teiburu no migi. And here it is in the sentence. Again, we're using that ni formation. Teiburu no migi ni isu ga arimasu. Now, I'm going to rewrite this really quickly. So this is our sentence as it is on the screen right now. You've got location ni object ga arimasu. And this is fine. This is natural. You can use this without any problems. There is one more way you can write it though. That location ni chunk, the word that comes before and the particle can get dropped in other places. So this form, let me type it out for you real fast. You can do this as well. And I'll give you the actual example. Isu ga teiburu no migi ni arimasu. The chair is to the right of the table. And you can see the information in it is the same, but it's, it's slightly different. And if you're wondering when would I use one, when would I use the other, this second one might be if someone said, where is the chair? So the chair is the focus of the sentence. You want to bring that to the top, the front of the sentence. Isu ga teburu no migi ni arimasu. The other one might not be that you're talking about the chair. Someone just says, what's in the room? And you say, oh, to the right of the table, there's a chair. And in that sense, there's no particular stress put on the table or the chair. So you can use the first sentence. But there's never going to be a case where you use one or the other and they're going to say, oh, that sounds really awkward. They're both carrying the same information, and there's only the slightest of nuances that changes which one you use. And like I said, there's no structural difference between arimasu and imasu. So we were talking about tables, but if you're talking about mom, or someone's mother, okasan ga teburu no migi ni imasu. Mom is to the right of the table. Who knows what she's doing? Now, once you start getting the sentences like this, you might start getting a bit of confusion. The more words there are, the harder it is to take words in the sentence and connect them to other words. So if you look here, you say, wait a second. We're talking about okasan and we're talking about a table. So which one do we use? Do we use the imasu or do we use arimasu? And there's two ways to answer it. I mean, they both arrive with you at the same answer. Remember, the pattern we're using is ga. Ga imasu or ga arimasu. So whatever that ga is hooked onto, in this case, okasan, that's what you're talking about. That's the focus of the sentence. So since it's okasan, we're going to use imasu. The table itself, we're actually not talking about the table existing here. All the table is a location that we're using to describe mother. So we would not use arimasu because we're not talking about there's a table. The fact that there's a table has already been established, in a previous sentence or discussion. We're talking about where is mom? Where is the mother? The mother is to the right of the table. And with this slightly longer sentence, we started with 3 words. We ended up with 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And that brings us to the end of the lesson. And so before we wrap things up, if there are any questions about the lesson that we had today, we have a few minutes. Feel free to ask them. Otherwise, I will wrap things up. If there are no questions, and while someone is typing one, if you are a fan of the TV show Futurama, which is not a new TV show, and you have Bender the robot in there could be, I think, a bit of debate, casual debate, as to which verb you use. I would probably go with iru, imasu, because that's a good question. With Bender's a robot, but they're close enough to a human. They walk, they talk, they make jokes, that they fall closer to the animate object camp than they do the inanimate object. And so if we were talking about Bender from Futurama, we'd probably use imasu. I haven't watched it with Japanese subtitles, so I don't know, but that's my guess. And Russ, I will answer your question, but I'm going to hold off just a couple of minutes to see if there are any other questions. That one's stepping outside of the scope of this lesson. So I'll end this lesson and I'll be happy to answer your question. but I don't see anyone else typing. So thank you so much for joining us in this lesson. Do not forget that these are available, excuse me, inside of Renshu here in our Discord server and on our hidden YouTube channel. So if you need to review this, check it out. Also, if you're looking for this lesson inside of Renshu, this is a newer version of Renshu that you'll probably have by the time you watch this video, but you want to go to resources and then look for Japanese lessons. And this is where it is. Even get a little cool call chat running. But we're down here, right here, existence verbs, aru and iru. So I hope it helped you today. Thank you for coming.